In citing us to page 62, you've read the transcript.
Correct.
Have you listened to the interview?
No, I have not.
You haven't heard the words as they were spoken by Dr. Murray?
No, I just, Mr. Walgren had provided me with just the transcript. It was typed.
And when did you discuss this with Mr. Walgren?
Objection B.
Did you discuss page 62 with Mr. Walgren?
Not specifically. This was part of my review of the case.
But did you discuss specifically that page with Mr. Walgren?
I think it may have been part of our discussions.
Thank you. Now, when a person has a cardiopulmonary arrest, time is of the essence, isn't it?
That's correct.
And a cardiopulmonary arrest is what you think occurred in this case. Is that correct?
I think the sequence that is most likely is that he had a respiratory arrest, meaning he stopped breathing, and that ultimately culminated in cardiac arrest. And the reason I say that is because Dr. Murray in his interview stated that when he found Mr.
There's still a question pending, Doctor. You don't think he had a cardiopulmonary arrest?
I do. I'm just trying to elaborate on how I believe the event occurred. I think that's more of a kind of a generic term. I'm trying to explain how the process occurred.
Well, on page 3 of your report, you used the term Jackson's cardiopulmonary arrest, didn't you?
That's correct.
Okay.
That is the ultimate culmination when there is both absence of breathing or ventilation as well as absence of pulse and of blood pressure.
Now, if we were to assume hypothetically that this occurred around 12 o'clock or just before, what's the first thing Dr. Murray should have done?
Sorry, I'm confused. When you say this occurred, are you talking about?
The cardiopulmonary arrest.
Do you have to segment them? Or can you answer the question?
No, I think I can answer a question. I think the first thing to have done in the situation he was in where he had lack of tools that are required is to call for help. That is the most important thing that he should have done, is to call for help.
So it would be your testimony that if the doctor walks in, sees the bed, sees the patient on the bed, not breathing, you think that he should, at that point in time, rather than spend any time with the patient, go get help?
No, he made an assessment. I mean, that is, making the assessment was observing his color, how well his tissues were perfused, feeling for a pulse which was around 122 and thready, and making a determination. And the first thing to do in that situation, I mean, that is a given. That is how you determine what was happening, is to basically address the airway problem. The fact that he wasn't breathing is to basically extend the head, do a jaw thrust to try to open the airway, and given the limited resources, or really the lack of resources he had, was to call for help at that point.
Okay, so you're going to allocate him the time to make the assessment that he's not breathing, determine whether he's got a pulse, and perhaps try to ventilate him.
I mean, that is done instantaneously. I mean, that is done. This is not a process that, when you're assessing someone that's down and in a critical situation, you make that determination immediately.
Does he need to touch him?
Yes.
Does he need to manipulate him in any way?
Manipulating the airway and doing a jaw thrust is really, it takes less than seconds. So those things are done as you're assessing the patient, but understanding that you have no resources. And ultimately, what is going to save the patient is getting help. I think it's incumbent to first call for help.
Well, he does have some resources, doesn't he?
What are you referring to?
He is a doctor. He's got skill and training.
Objection seems fast.
Sustained.
No evidence that he's a doctor?
I think you're going to have to rephrase the question. I don't know what it means in the context of resources.
Okay, well, there are things that you can do when you see a person not breathing that don't require apparatus. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
For example, if you saw me fall over and I'm not breathing, well, you probably wouldn't want to do anything, but if that were to occur, would you immediately go for help, or would you try to maybe do CPR, ventilation?
I would first make that initial assessment. Someone can be down, they could have had a seizure. You make that initial assessment just to the very basic assessment of the patient. And if you are not in a hospital and you're not in an area where you have resources, first thing to do is to call 911. I mean, that is really very fundamental.
Well, say that I collapsed, I'm not breathing, and you make that note, you feel for a pulse. Would you, as a doctor, would you go pick up the phone and call 911, or would you assign that to maybe someone else?
I think if there is somebody around, the first rule is to have that person call them. But if you are alone and there is nobody and you don't have the resources, you have to call 911 yourself right away.
What if someone's in the next room?
You can call out for that person, and if there is an immediate response, that would seem reasonable.
And you would be reasonable to tell that person that you need help and to get security?
No.
If security theoretically is within a matter of less than a minute, 30 seconds away from your position there to this door in the back of the courtroom,
No.
you wouldn't go that far to get security?
No, I would want 911 called. Security is not going to provide any additive help to what I'm capable of doing, but the resources through the paramedics and the fire department are.
So you don't think that the designation of someone else to get help while you tend to the patient would be appropriate?
No, a designation for them to call 911, not to just inform them to come or just to let them know. The designation for that person or individuals to immediately call 911. That is what I'm referring to as being appropriate.
Do you know anything about the security arrangements at the Jackson House?
I'm not aware of those details.
Do you know that there was a front gate that's locked?
I've heard that, but I'm not very, I don't know the exact details.
Are
of
you
the
aware of the
arrangements.
fact that nobody gets in that front gate without security letting them in?
Objection relevant, Your Honor. 352.
I'm going to sustain the objection under 352.
Okay. how long would you spend on the phone with 911 before you went back to the patient?
I think most of us that have ever encountered calling 911, you would understand that it's really seconds. I mean, when you call 911, it's not like you're put on a voice recorder and put on hold. It is immediate.
Well, when you're using a cell phone, is it as immediate as when you're using a landline? Do you know?
I'm not sure what you're...
Okay. Are you aware of the fact there was...
Vague, beyond his area of expertise.
I'll overrule the objection.
You don't know?
I'm not, no, I don't know what you're referring to.
Are you aware of the fact there was no landlines at the Jackson house?
I did read that in the notes, yes.
Okay. Do you know whether that's a complicating factor in calling 911?
I think if you have a cell phone around, you can dial 911 through your cell phone.
Okay. Did you hear that the person that did call 911, it took him 2 minutes and 43 seconds on that phone call?
To make the phone call? I object
What's
to
the
vague.
objection?
Vague.
Sustained.
The 911 call that was made, are you aware of the fact it was 2 minutes and 43 seconds?
I don't.
Overruled.
You know, I don't know if it was that period of time having the discussion about the details of the circumstance, but when you call 911, you speak to someone that actually can assist you and guide you, but what they do immediately is prompt that call for paramedics to get there. And in this case, if you recall, paramedics got there in 6 minutes. So you can potentially be on a call longer, because unfortunately I've been in that circumstance myself, but the call that's initiated to the fire department and paramedics, that happens instantaneously. So I think there's different ways to look at what you're asking.